Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me much pleasure to be here. As you know, our Honorable Prime Minister was to open this conference, this Congress, I should say, but he's not here. As you know, he's away in India at the moment for the first Pacific Regional Leaders Meeting that has been organized by the Indian government to be hosted in Delhi and Jaipur. When I saw the list of speakers that you have, I was very envious because obviously, and I'm sure some of the other accounting organizations would be envious too, because you have such a good caliber of speakers compared to perhaps what they've had previously. So therefore, it is somewhat difficult, I think, to talk about the same areas, because obviously these people are very, very well qualified to speak on those areas. But what I thought I'd talk to you about very quickly this morning, because at the moment, as I said to somebody last night, what occupies 7/8 of my mind at the moment is the oncoming budget for 2016. And so I'd like to put into perspective what actually are some of the critical facts and figures that you need to know. You obviously are a very important organization, a cadre of people who are professionals and of course have a very influencing effect both within your companies, your own organizations, and the people that you work for. So if I could put that into perspective, and I'll use the slides that I used with the Fiji Chamber of Commerce last Saturday when they had a very good forum on the budget. I'd like to thank the organizers for that. And I hope that the Fiji Chamber of Commerce and Industry does actually now organize itself at the more grassroots level through the various branches that they have. One of the things that actually has been missing in Fiji quite critically are representative organizations that are well representative and democratic themselves. So whether it's the Fiji Employers Federation, whether it's Fiji Chamber of Commerce and their branches, whether it is Fiji Manufacturers Association, which I'm very glad to say is now up and running, and there are various other organizations like the Retailers Association. Some of these organizations, unfortunately, have been quite dormant, if you like. You've had only 1 or 2 people running them for the past 2-3 decades, or in some cases 5 to 10 years, without even having elections themselves, and perhaps losing touch with their own membership. So it's really good for a country, in particular with the trajectory we have now with the economy, and we have Justin from Westpac, who will of course be talking to you about how the economy is growing, what are the strengths of that. It is very critical to have these organizations run well, because we obviously have a lot of foreign interest now being shown in Fiji. So when they do come to us, they say, can we meet your Manufacturers Association? So to put it very colloquially, we'll feel very mandua to refer them to an organization that's perhaps not representative of all the manufacturers, all the manufacturers that are actually doing the good or the big business in Fiji. That being said, ladies and gentlemen, if we could have the first slide, please, Ahmed. And just to set out to you the fiscal framework for the past 3 years. And if you see the revenue, of course, has grown over the past 3 years, projected to grow to about 3.1 billion this year. As a percent of GDP, it's 35.9. Obviously, the economy is growing. Our GDP has grown. It's now worth about $8 billion. Expenditure as a percent of GDP has also grown for various reasons, and I'll show that to you. But the net deficit projected for this year is 2.5, notwithstanding the growth in the expenditure. And of course, we've got the debt levels. You'll see that in nominal terms it's increased, but as a percent of GDP it is actually decreased because the pie has grown. You can move on to the next slide, please. That's a breakdown of revenue and expenditure comparing the 3 years. Of course, 2015, like I said, is projected. You'll see what is of interest is the tax and the non-tax revenue, 2.4 billion, non-tax is 716 million. Out of that, the operating is 1.9, but you'll see a significant growth in the capital expenditure that's been allocated. You know, people talking about the roads and bridges that are being built, that's where the capital expenditure is going. Grown significantly, almost threefold compared to 2013. It's 1.3 billion as opposed to 568 million in 2013. Again, as a percentage of GDP, 2.5%. Next slide, please. Now, this is very interesting, in particular for the speakers here who are, for example, Phil, we were talking very briefly last night about PAYE and services being provided. If you can look at the PAYE tax, the revenue that's gained from that, withholding dividend tax is 84 million. Company tax, which we think is still very low, is only $207 million. The government obviously is giving a lot of concessions to entice companies to invest. And I also think that assessments have also been done. There's a lot of leakage, as we've said in the recent times, through non-payment of taxes, and that's another matter for us to discuss. 26 million through sole traders partnerships, which again is an interesting area. As you know, the professions in Fiji are not corporatized. You have to have partnerships and sole traders, sole sort of professions. Provisional tax, 10 million. So the important ones, branch profit remittance, 1.4. ICT business license fees, tourist VAT refund registration fee. Gross revenue, 474 million, less refunds, it's $446 million. This is a major challenge for us, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll tell you why it is a major challenge. On to the next slide, please. Of course, VAT contributes about $794 million towards our revenue collection. You can see the gross VAT collection, less the refunds, and of course less the tourism VAT refunds. Capital gains, 43 million, service turnover tax, 57, stamp duty is 68 million, social responsibility tax, some of you will be paying that in this room, about 7.7 million, telecommunications levy, credit card levy, 3.8 million, third-party insurance, 1.9, and fringe benefit tax, about $18 million. Next slide, please. Customs collection, another area of concern. In fact, some of the figures that have come out for the first 6 months of this year, notwithstanding the fact that the economy is growing, notwithstanding the fact that the collection of VAT collection domestically has increased by 10%, the collection of VAT at import is in fact has dropped. That is of concern. And there could be obvious various reasons for that, which we can discuss later. Fiscal duties, 365 million, of which about $84 million is excise duty from alcohol and tobacco. Excise duty, as I mentioned, is 98 million, and we have the luxury vehicle levy, which you know that was started 2.2. Customs collections gross 519, total is 513 million. Resource tax, which is essentially tax on water extraction, is 34 million. Departure tax is $122 million that we collect. And fish levy is $438,000. Overall net revenue collections is $2.1 billion. The next slide, please. Funding for roads and jetties. As you can see, both in nominal terms and also as a percentage of the overall spend, it's not just roads and jetties, it's also bridges. You can see a significant increase. 2013, 305 million. This year, 654 million. It's doubled, more than doubled. And I think you can see the results on the road. Next slide, please. Education. Again, in nominal terms, funding for education is increased significantly compared to 2013 with the introduction of free education, the tertiary education loan scheme, and of course the scholarships that are now being given for the 600 top scholars. So it is a percentage of GDP, of course, of the overall spend has gone down from 18.8 to 16.7, but nonetheless it's increased to $556 billion. So we're spending over $500 million in education, which of course is very good for business, as I mentioned to a group of business people a couple of weeks ago. It does mean that those of you who are looking at recruiting people, you're getting a better crop of people, in particular in the next few years. It also means, for example, as I mentioned to the garment industry, through the technical colleges that are being set up, we already have 3, there'll be another 7 set up by the beginning of next year. There are free courses, for example, being offered in basic sewing, and it's free, so it's a 4-week course. So rather than the garment factory actually taking time and money out to train people off the street to learn how to sew, you already have a basically trained group of people who you can use as employees. So therefore putting less pressure on business, but of course meaning that more people would be engaged a lot more readily as employees. Next slide, please. Funding for electricity and water. Again, a significant increase, 2013 to now 2015. You can see it's more than doubled, $268 million. That, of course, includes rural electrification. As you know, for example, we are now extending the grid around Biti level for it to be completely, all over Fiji, on all the major roads, on Kings Road and Queens Road now. But there are things contained within that. There's a lot of pressure, of course, on the urban centers. There's huge movement of population into the urban areas and peri-urban areas. So whilst they have articulated water systems, the reality is that there's so much pressure now that you need to actually expand the infrastructure within the urban and peri-urban areas. Those of you who are from the West would also know about the drought that we have at the moment. The Meteorological Office is now projecting that there will be a drought until March of next year. This, of course, is beyond our control, but it does mean that we need to find long-term solutions for people to have access to water. We're currently, for example, barging water out to the islands over here in the Western Division. There are people, for example, living between Rakiraki and Ba, where their wells are drying up, the boreholes aren't necessarily functioning well to deliver that amount of water. So we have to be able to provide, we're carting water to those areas. But the reality is that we need to be able to provide long-term solutions, and this is when we talk about climate change. These are some of the realities that we have to be aware of, and indeed as businesses you need to be aware of. One of the things that we found is that sometimes when we discuss roads, water, electricity, and this is one of the things that we like you to understand, most businesses actually don't take a holistic picture. In the same way as I said that, again to the garment industry a couple of weeks ago, as professionals, as Fijians, we need to be concerned about all the changes in society, even social changes. To put a commercial spin to it, apart from the sort of whole moral argument, is that domestic violence laws. We've introduced domestic violence decree. The reality is that a garment factory owner, somebody running this hotel, where majority of the people who are servicing your room, majority of the people who are serving you when you went and had breakfast this morning are women. And as we know that, for example, majority of the people who are victims of domestic violence are women. So if you don't have adequate laws protecting them, what do you think will happen to their levels of productivity? If they are being bashed up the night before at home, how do you think that they will serve you when they come to serve you breakfast? How do you think they'll service the rooms? How do you think they'll do the stitching in the factory? So these are realities that we all need to be concerned about. And one of the, I suppose, points I'd like to make is that we need to take advantage of such discussions and such congresses to be able to take a holistic picture. We always talk about how well Singapore has done, but the reality is that you had brand Singapore being advocated in Singapore in the early 70s and 80s, where everybody from all sectors in the country got together and said, what is good for Singapore? That was the focus, and then you sort of went off and did your own little thing in your own little sectors. And I think that is very, very critical for all of us to understand. If we can have the next slide, please. So just staying on that slide also, you would have heard through the media, a few weeks ago there was a forum in which the Fiji Roads Authority, I understand, had talked about good governance and allocation of contracts and the tender processes and creating transparency. But one of the issues that came out of that also was, with all this capital works focus, the issue that arises, do we have the level and the right number of professionals to be able to deliver this major capital works? That's a major challenge for us. This is why, for example, they say that there's a shortage of engineers in Fiji. There's a shortage of various other professions within Fiji. I think at the moment in Fiji, I stand to be corrected, there's probably only about 3 or 4 qualified quantity surveyors. So if we have such major works being carried out, how will they be able to keep up with the projects? Or indeed, will the projects be slowed down, conversely speaking, because we have only 4 or 5 quantity surveyors available within the market? This is why government, for example, in the top of scholarships, we are not giving any scholarships for people to become lawyers. And I joked about it, there are too many lawyers, and perhaps some of you may not necessarily be happy with their services. But we do not have town planners, enough town planners. We don't have enough surveyors. There's a shortage of that. We don't have enough environmental scientists. You know, if you have your EIA studies being done because you're going to put up a factory, there's not enough people there. There's not enough capacity in those professions. Funding for health, as you know that, again, we've expanded the fiscal allocation for health. It's gone up both in nominal terms and, of course, as a percentage of the spend that we have through the budget allocation. Health, ladies and gentlemen, is one area that we do want to have a leapfrog, if you like. Fiji does not have a full tertiary care or health services available as we speak. So if one of us in this room had a heart attack now and we needed open heart surgery, there's nobody here to do it for you. You have to go to Australia and New Zealand, the nearest places. Or, you know, if you're lucky enough time, maybe you can go to India and various other places to have open heart surgery. That is the reality, and that is the challenge. So government is now focusing on various ways of enticing the private sector to also participate in medical services. We need to, of course, liberalize it too, as we need to, in a way, liberalize the legal and the accounting profession. We need to have, for example, diagnostic centers available in Fiji, and hopefully we'll be able to address some of those issues in the budget. But of course, once you get full medical tertiary facilities available in Fiji, it has enormous potential for us in growth in the services sector. We have the only regional medical school in the entire Pacific. I'm not sure about the University of Papua New Guinea, maybe they do have one, but at least all the other Pacific Island countries, Fiji School of Medicine is the only one. But you can imagine that if you have full tertiary medical facilities available in Fiji, you have the opportunity to then actually fully market Fiji for retirement villages to be set up. And in fact, about 3 years ago, we had some Japanese investors who were interested in setting up retirement villages in Fiji, but they could not, and they did not want to, unless we had full tertiary care available in Fiji. So that's, of course, another potential here. There's, of course, the potential of attracting people for elective surgeries from Australia and New Zealand to come to Fiji and have elective surgeries done. And indeed, you know, what a better place to recuperate than anywhere else other than Fiji. So these are the sort of potential areas that we have, but we need to make those initial investments in those areas. Could we have the next slide, please? Just by way of reference, we talked about the industry and trade programs, the type of money that's being put in. Tourism Fiji, as you know, 23.5 million consistently now. It's been about 5 years. Investment Fiji grant that has increased to 2 million. As you know, that they have now launched a one window application where you get your approvals within significantly less period of time from the 4 top tier agencies. You pay online. Those services obviously we need to expand. National Export Strategy, Commerce Commission. I know many people love to hate the Commerce Commission, but somebody said to me, we are glad to see that the grant allocated has been reduced to the Commerce Commission, but it's not deliberate. But the other one that's actually working quite well is the small to medium enterprise grants. In fact, that's now gone up to about $3 million. And that is really empowering a lot of ordinary Fijians. And I'll give you an example. For example, we have people, you may see when you drive from Suva to Nandi, people have got these pigsties along the side in the villages. A lot of these people actually have a couple of pigs, or some people have goats, and that provides an income for them. But they do not have enough money to be able to save, to be able to move to the next stage. To be able to save some money and say, expand the pigsty to have 2 or 3 more pigs, or get more goats, or the lady who sells handicraft at the Outrigger Hotel, you see her sitting down in the corridor and selling a handicraft. Her ability to now make more handicraft, local handicraft, is restricted because whatever money she makes actually goes towards upkeep of her life, feeding the kids, feeding herself, feeding the husband, whatever the case may be. So by giving this $1,000 grant, we are able to then put them up onto the next stage. It's been, in fact, channeled through Fiji Development Bank. We do not give people money itself. So for example, if Joe has been identified to get $1,000 so he can expand his pigsty, he says, well, I need 4x2 timber, I need some nails, I need some fence. Then the supplier is identified and the check is actually made out to the supplier. So they go off with the check, they go to whatever Singatoka hardware store and they buy those goods, and then they actually make the additional pigsty, or they buy the seeds, whatever the case may be. Buy Fijian and Made Fijian, Buy Fijian and Fijian Made campaign has been very successful, apart from the fact that it has now put Fijian goods in a more sort of positive sense, and people actually identify it. It creates a sense of a national pride and indeed patriotism. One critical point that's there is the trade policy framework. A lot of you would have been consulted on that, or at least your businesses would have been. And that's one framework that's going to be tied in with the green growth framework that Fiji is very much keen to project into the future policy considerations. We have not, of course, under that put down the amount of money that's been made allocated for the Fiji International. Fiji International is giving us enormous exposure, which is a golf tournament, for those who may not know. It's in the tune of about, I understand from memory, about $7 million. But it puts Fiji into the homes of about 400 million homes, 400 million viewers who actually get to see Natandola and, of course, Fiji. And it's, in fact, showcased even before the tournament itself in other tournaments. I think that's the last of the slide. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, that basically in a nutshell is to bring home some realities, because we've started to get a lot of, we get people giving in their budget submissions. What we do find is that most of the budget submissions are very narrowly focused. So you'll have businesses writing in and saying, make this duty-free, make sure we get tax concessions, make sure our write-offs can be carried off, our losses can be carried forward for the next 12 or 15 years. But there's no sense of how we can, as a country, come together to be able to address some of the fundamental issues and then address some of the specific sectorial areas that we've highlighted. What I'd like to talk about very briefly is essentially we need a marketplace in Fiji of new ideas and good ideas. You may recall that last year I had mentioned to this forum, and I think it was before the budget, that one of the aspects that I was lamenting about was the inability of the professionals in Fiji to be able to come out into the public space and be able to give a professional opinion on matters of national interest. So, for example, if the budget is about to come out, or if the budget has come out, or, for example, if a political party launches its manifesto and has a particular policy in the economy, we do not find anybody, for example, in this room that I can see that has actually come out in the media, and nor does the media, for that matter, I have to say, source that type of professional opinion and say, look, we believe that by having this policy, it will have this impact on the economy. Or that if you do X, Y, Z, it will mean that we'll be able to project ourselves a lot better in the economy, it will have an impact on employment, etc. That kind of professional discussion does not take place. My plea to you is that please do start that. Because if we want to move ourselves to the next stage of development and want to take advantage of the very good economic platform that we are on, we need to create a marketplace of new ideas. We need to be able to come out and break out of the shell of the past and say, look, I'm giving this as my professional view, as my opinion, because the more ideas we have in the marketplace, the more ideas that we as government get, the better it is for us to make informed decisions. And I think that is what is critically lacking. We are obviously not the sole repository of all knowledge. Everybody knows that. You're just as good as how many good people you have around you. And we need that. And unfortunately in Fiji, of course, previously it depended if somebody stood up and said, oh, he's only saying that because he's from that province or that ethnic group or that religious organization. We need to shed that. We need to be able to hear your opinion as a CPA professional, as an accountant, as an economist, without the sort of political baggage that we've had in the past, because that is very, very critical, ladies and gentlemen. The other area that I'd like to also talk about is that we need to demystify the professions. I mean, that's why I had a brief conversation with Phil. I don't know where he's here somewhere. And what he's done, for example, with accounting firms in Australia, of course, the latitude is there for them because the legal provisions aren't as prohibitive as we have in Fiji. And indeed, that's something that FIA, through a new president, can look at in terms of how we can change the codes that relate to professions. It was very interesting that he was mentioning that in New Zealand, they, for example, liberalized optometry services where, anybody could run an optometry service, but you had to have a professional optometrist who could be employed. So a business person could run an optometrist outlet, but they don't have to be an optometrist themselves. We need to be able to do things like that in Fiji. There's an opportunity for that. And indeed, we need to be able to, as I said, demystify the law in Fiji for those professions. We found out, for example, that when we were appointed to government, there were only one or two law firms that did most of the work in Fiji as far as commercial work was concerned. But the rates that they were charging was in fact sometimes double the amount that you get in Australia from the top 5 law firms. It was ridiculous. It is ridiculous. The cost base of operation is much lower than what you have, for example, in Australia and New Zealand. So we need to be able to, look at the way that we deal as professionals in the way that we offer our services. And I think that is very, very critical. The reason I'm saying all of this is because we need to be able to say to ourselves, okay, what's next? Great, 3 years of growth rate in excess of 4%, wonderful, let's tap ourselves on the shoulders and rest. No, we can't. This is just the beginning. We have to maintain the momentum. We now have free education available. As a government, we are now concerned because that's now a recurring cost. That education budget will probably remain the same now. We all want better medical services. That has to increase. Everybody loves the roads, but the moment you're going to cut back on the budget on roads, apart from doing a few things smarter, people will say, oh, they're no longer investing in infrastructure. We've created some legitimate expectations, if you like, from the amount of money that's been put in. So, what do we do to make ourselves work smarter? What do we do to be able to have that revenue for government, but at the same time, you as professionals, the business community, is able to move on to the next stage? We are very much committed to liberalizing the economy. But of course, we need to at the same time create certain level playing fields. And this includes, for example, free water for those people, households who earn less than $30,000. Free medicine for those people who earn less than $20,000. We now have free education. We have subsidized bus fares. That is creating a level playing field. It is also investing in our human capital. That is very, very critical. As you know, post-1987, a lot of well-qualified people left Fiji. We need to build up that stock, and that is very critical. You'll hear from people like Aiyaz Khan talking about how state-owned enterprises can be turned around. But that ability to turn state-owned enterprise, for example, is limited. Will be limited if you do not have good people with you, if you do not have well-qualified people with you, if you do not have professionals with you. And it requires a mindset change. Last week on Saturday, we had in the question and answer time, we had a gentleman who stood up and said, look, you're going to increase the port fees to the Commerce Commission. It's going to have a huge impact on our ability to import and export. What he failed to mention, that the port fees had not been reviewed for, I think, since 2005 or 2006. What he failed to mention is that through the divestment of our shares in the subsidiary company of Ports Fiji, the levy that used to be charged on containers by shipping companies is no longer levied, because they used to levy those fees because of the inefficiency of the port. The turnaround times has now increased by 1/3, is improved. What he also failed to mention is that the Suva port a third of it cannot be used for container ships because it's too weak, it'll fall into the ocean. So we need to be able, we can all talk about hubbing in Fiji, and it's great to hub Fiji, but we need to be able to have the right level of investment and the right level of foresight into the future. In your conference about strategy, foresight into the future to ensure that we build the capacity on a sustained basis. As part of the divestment, the strategy that government has, as you know, that we've advertised for divestment of our shares in Fiji Ports Corporation Limited, Airports Fiji Limited, Fiji Electricity Authority, and the government printery. It's not just simply selling the family jewels. It's not even selling the entire family jewels. It's to be able to get the right strategic partners. It's to be able to get the right type of management and the right type of technology going into the future. And we have to make those decisions now. Otherwise, we won't be able to take advantage of the trajectory that we are on. And that is very, very critical. In the same way, if you see Fiji Airways, some of the tough decisions that were made regarding Fiji Airways, the ability of government to get Fiji Airways together with Fiji National Provident Fund, has today meant that Fiji Airways is now making more money than it ever did. It is now three brand new A330-200 series aircraft. The next stage now is, of course, to go to new destinations. And I'm happy to say we had some discussions with the board only 2 days ago, and they will be going to 2 new destinations from next year. There is a strategic goal that we have. Sometimes strategic goals means wearing the bad weather for a period of time. The same way, if we are able to go to other hubs through our airline, our national carrier, we need to be able to have a foresight to say, by going to this particular hub, we are positioning ourselves for the future. By going to this particular hub or this particular destination, we are in fact creating Fiji more as a hub. So these are the sort of strategic decisions that we are making, but at the same time, we need to be able to ensure that the plans that we have in place are being implemented by people who are appointed on merit. That is very, very critical, ladies and gentlemen. We are having people that are being appointed on merit. Because as the example that I gave, at the end of the day, when you have somebody calling up and saying, there's no water in my tap, the person who's calling up and saying, there's no water in my tap, they really don't care who's going to ensure the water is going to go into the tap. They just want the water in the tap. When the electricity wires go down, they want it fixed immediately because they want electricity. When your businesses cannot access three-phase power or cannot get enough electricity where you want to build a factory, you don't really care what province, what ethnic group, what religious-based organization, indeed even what gender the person is, what their sexual orientation is. You really don't care. You just want the right person to deliver the goods that you want. And the only way that will happen is that if you've got the best person for the right job. And this is where you'll see that countries like Singapore and indeed like Mauritius have progressed because they took that strategic decision. And that is very, very critical for us as a country to move forward to the next stage. As I've mentioned to you that we've created a level playing field, that we want to create more of a level playing field. I think it is also critical at the same time to think about how can Fiji, in this whole strategic thinking, take itself up to the next stage. We think there's enough potential, as I mentioned, for Fiji in the services sector. We have a very young population. We have a very well-educated workforce. Indeed, it'll get even better. And well-educated students coming through. And there's obviously a lot of potential, whether it's call centers, whether it's data centers. Now the telecommunication sector in Fiji has leapfrogged into another stage altogether. It was very interesting talking to people from other countries. They cannot believe that Fiji actually has 4G. If you compare ourselves to Papua New Guinea, I understand some areas still has 2G. They have a 37% mobile penetration rate. We, by traditional standards, have a 100% penetration rate as far as voice penetration is concerned. We have about 105%, penetration rate, which means that there are more SIM cards active at the moment as we speak than actual people living in Fiji. I know some of you have 2 or 3 phones. I don't know what the purpose is, but obviously some people do. Nowadays, of course, you get mobile phones with 2 SIM cards in 1 mobile phone. But of course, our major challenge is internet connection. This is why we've been setting up telecenters. It is very critical to have telecenters. We are, as you know, was announced we're going to go into digital television. Testing is already being done. If you go to Super Bowl House on the 2nd floor, you can get digital television. That's where testing is done. We've got a soft launch of that in the Super Nosori corridor, I should say the Nosori-Lemi corridor, around about by October or so, and in the Western Division by beginning of next year. Now this brings about a lot of opportunities. But the trick is, ladies and gentlemen, to turn those opportunities into actual tangible benefits for everybody. That is really the trick. I look at Aiyaz Khan and I have to go back to this. We have, for example, the Pine Group. They've been around for 40 years. The Fiji Pine Group did not make a single dollar of profit. The replanting program was atrocious. The landowners were supposed to get bonuses. They never did. We now have 3 lots of bonuses that have been paid. They've got a very healthy replanting program. And now on a much better trajectory. AFL is now, we reformed the laws in AFL. When we did that, I think a lot of people thought that, maybe they're not doing the right thing. The real estate at Nadi Airport was a lot more inexpensive than downtown Namaka. Namaka was like 5 times more expensive than the real estate in Nadi Airport, which is a ridiculous situation. Most airports are the most expensive real estate in any country. Now that's been reversed, it's slowly being reversed. We have now $105 million being spent by AFL, completely not guaranteed by government. AFL is funding it through their own pockets. I'm not going to steal Faiz's speech, but as a government, these are the improvements that we do want to bring about. So it is very, very critical. In the same way, talking about telecommunications, we are looking at infrastructure sharing. It just makes a lot of sense for telecommunications company to spend the monies on service delivery as opposed to spend a lot of money on the capital investment. So many countries, as you know, for example, now have infrastructure sharing. If you look at some of the hills around where you have the telecommunication masts, you'll find about 4 or 5 towers. We should have only 1 tower. It can be jointly owned by our telecommunications companies or owned by government. And then you have your antennas by all the different companies. You can put in the television companies there too. These are the sort of smarter ways that we need to work. And it is very critical for all of us, all of you who are decision makers, to be able to contribute to your organizations, for us to be able to get onto that next stage. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that in terms of positioning ourselves, as I mentioned about the service industry and also, of course, the manufacturing industry, I think has a lot of potential in Fiji. But to be able to, again, differentiate ourselves, we think it is very critical. For example, if you look at the tourism industry, there are wonderful beaches in Fiji, but there are equally wonderful beaches in Vanuatu, perhaps in Samoa, maybe to a lesser extent, Phuket, Bali, lots of other places. So how do we distinguish ourselves? Numerous surveys over and over again say that one of the key features of Fiji, why people like coming back to Fiji, are the Fijian people. The friendliness, the hospitality, the genuine friendliness, the genuine hospitality, sense of making you feel at home. That is great. But we also need to be able to have some other markers that differentiates us. Because if your product is not good, if you are not able to distinguish yourself further, then people have numerous other choices. So, you can market yourself by saying, we have good labor standards. You can market yourself by saying, we adhere to the Green Growth Framework. We have more focus on renewable energy sources. We have a less of a carbon footprint. These are the ways that we can distinguish ourselves. This is why precisely we're carrying out a lot of this infrastructure work that is being held. Again, going back to this garment industry people you spoke about, because there's a lot of potential in Fiji now. We've re-engineered the garment industry. We used to employ 20,000 people, mainly women, when we had the preferential treatment of market access into USA. It dropped down to 4,000 and it dropped off. Today it's about 7,000 people that work in the garment industry. One of the factories down in one of the suburbs in Suva, they said to us they used to feel really mandua to bring their potential customers to the factory because the road was atrocious. If the road is good, the airport is good, you've got 4 laning coming out of it, you've probably done half of your marketing already. If your labor standards are good, you're in. So the changes that we're bringing about, the amount of money that is being spent, ladies and gentlemen, is overall good for the economy. It's overall good for your businesses. And that is the point I'd like to make. The last point I'd like to make, ladies and gentlemen, there is still definitely, and I know it is a bit of a sour point, a certain level of culture of dishonesty in Fiji. The issue that I raised about the VAT collection rates going down from importation of goods does not necessarily mean we are importing less. The reality is that there is under-declaration of the value of goods that is being brought into Fiji. Because of VAT-exempt items, there are supermarkets who are rigging the system. There was a study done a few years ago that said that Fiji's black economy is valued at about 1/3 of our GDP. If you're working on today's figures, 1/3 of $8 billion is a lot of money. And if you take even 15% of that, that is still a lot of money. The reality is this: we have one of the lowest corporate taxation rates in the Pacific, or in this part of the world, 20%. A regional global head office, 17.5%. You list in the South Pacific Stock Exchange is 10%. If we are able to get rid of these anomalies within the taxation system, if we are able to remove that culture of dishonesty, if we are able to focus more on volume-based transactions, then we are on a very, very good footing. We will not be able to do this. We will not be able to do this if we do not have everybody's concurrence. We do not have everybody's willingness to subscribe to this idea. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is very critical. In the same way that you run your own organizations, through your HR people, you need everybody to adhere to the cultural objective of your organization. Whether it's CPA, whether it's your own businesses. In the same way, we all need to, as Fijians, subscribe to the idea of what is good for Fiji. And only then we'll be able to progress significantly and take us up to the next stage of economic development in Fiji. This is very, very critical. I had, just very topical, I was just reading some news excerpts that just came in from UK, where certain professionals in Fiji have given an interview saying that the recent arrests pertaining to allegations of sedition is actually there to crush democracy. What a redundant and superfluous statement to make by a professional. In fact, it is there to protect democracy. So the value of that professional giving his opinion is actually lacks complete credibility. So what I'm saying to you, ladies and gentlemen, is that as professionals, as political commentators, as social commentators, as economic commentators, we need to be able to be independent in our analysis of what is happening in Fiji. If Justin were to stand up here and give you analysis of the Fijian economy based on Australian government policy, it may be completely skewed. And his value as an economist would be diminished significantly. But if he's going to stand up here and give his view as an economist that is looking at the economy and looking at the demarcators that value or that assess an economy, then of course his credibility is enhanced. You'll go back to him and get his opinion. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is very, very critical for Fiji and for all of us in terms of our personal development. I'd like to thank CPA for this opportunity to speak here, and I wish all of you a very good Congress. Thank you.
During the housekeeping, when the line goes, that's the sign for us to
play at the right time. So we started patenting. Here's our first patent from 2007. We had remotes built on books and built software and all sorts of crazy things. But the core of our idea was, if as you're reading a story, if you're reading writing down in Europe, go bang. The problem with that, of course, is everybody reads at a different reading speed. So how are we going to get that all to work? Well, one.